Good evening and welcome. I am Amarachi Ubadi. Tonight, court grants African Action Congress presidential candidate Omoyele Sowore and his co-accused Olawale Bakare conditional bail fixes November 7th for their trial over alleged treason. Police arrest 22-year-old man for allegedly kidnapping his own sister and demanding 10 million naira ransom from their father in Taraba State. President Buhari holds town hall meeting with Nigerians in South Africa, asks them to be good ambassadors, excel, and always remember home. And ban on face masks stirs violent protests in Hong Kong as mask-wearing activists ask others to defy government order.
On business news tonight, federal government seals additional €70 million bilateral funding agreement with Germany.
And on sports news, Tottenham Hotspur manager Mauricio Pochettino insists he will remain at the dugout for the long haul.
Hello, and from Abuja, Nigeria Union of Teachers Edo State chapter celebrate Governor Godwin Obaseki of a purposeful and modern approach to teaching and learning infrastructure.
Justice Ijoma Ojukwu of the Federal High Court in Abuja today granted the publisher of online news magazine Sahara Reporters, Mr. Omoyele Sowore, and his co-accused Olawale Bakare bail. Justice Ojukwu granted Mr. Sowore bail in the sum of 100 million naira and two sureties in like sum. The sureties must show evidence of tax payment for 3 years of 2014, 2015, and 2016, and must be resident in the Federal Capital Territory. Our correspondent, Amaka Okafo, has more.
It's the hearing of the bail application filed by Mr. Omoyele Sowore, the convener of the Revolution Now, and his co-defendant, Mr. Olawale Bakare. Counsel to the defendant, Mr. Femi Falana, takes a swipe at the security operative who wanted to stop him from talking to the defendants. Not long after, the trial judge, Justice Ijoma Ojukwu, arrives, and the counsels in the case exchange fireworks for and against the bail application filed by Mr. Sowore and his co-defendant. In arguing for bail, Mr. Falana assured the court that if granted bail, the defendants will not interfere with the evidence or witnesses of the prosecution. He cited several cases where persons accused of treasonable felony were granted bail on self-recognizance and urged the courts to do same for his client or, at most, admit them to bail on liberal terms. In his opposition to the bail application, counsel to the federal government, Mr. Hassan Liman, urged the court to disregard the submissions of the defendants because they touch on the substance of the case. He argues that the charge against the defendants are severe, carrying life sentences if convicted, hence the high risk of the defendants jumping bail if granted. After hearing the two parties, the trial judge, Justice Ijoma Ojukwu, stands down the case. And while she was away, this transpired between the defendants and the security operatives as Mr. Sowore's supporters swung around him. After an hour, the trial judge returns with a verdict. She granted bail to Mr. Sowore and his co-defendant, Mr. Olawale Bakare. Mr. Sowore was granted bail in the sum of 100 million naira and two sureties, one of which must deposit 50 million naira with the court. The sureties are to swear an affidavit of means and submit their tax clearance for 2014 through to 2016, while his co-defendant, Mr. Olawale Bakare, was also granted bail but in the sum of 50 million naira, one surety who must swear to an affidavit of means. Their sureties must be residents of the FCT. Both Mr. Sowore and Bakare are to deposit their travel documents with the court and remain within the jurisdiction of the Federal Capital Territory and must not participate in any rally throughout the duration of their case.
We have said it in open court, and the court has granted accelerated hearing. For the prosecution, we are ready to prosecute within the time limit, and we shall do that timelessly.
There is nobody who is above the law in the country. We will take appropriate steps to ensure that our clients regain their freedom as soon as possible.
A younger brother to Mr. Sowore and a member of his legal team describes the bail conditions as too stringent.
Of course, the judge has discretion to grant bail, but it must not be too in excess. Of course, this one is very, very excessive. Mr. Sowore and Mr. Olawale Bakare are to remain in the custody of the Department of the State Services pending the perfection of the bail conditions. Amaka Okafor, Channels Television News.
From the courts, we turn attention to security in Taraba State, where a 22-year-old man has been arrested by the State Police Command for allegedly aiding the kidnap of his 10-year-old sister, Amina Umar, on her way to school. The suspect, Abdul Basit Umar, alongside two other accomplices, Sadiq Sani and Abdullahi Habib, were said to have demanded the sum of 10 million naira as ransom to free the young girl. The State Police Command explains that officers of the State Investigative Bureau arrested the three suspects on their way to collect a ransom of 4 million naira, which they later settled for. The major suspect, Abdul Basit Umar, told journalists that it was his first time engaging in such heinous crime, insisting he needed money to study overseas.
The masterminder of the crime, Abubakar Umar, who happened to be a biological brother to the victim, as on the said date, criminally conspired with other suspects and lured the innocent girl into a blue Honda Hennessy car with registration number MKF 67JK Kaduna and took her to Dove Hotel, Mayodasa. The suspect contacted the family and demanded for a ransom of 10 million naira only. The kidnappers later accepted after bargaining to collect the sum of 4 million. While on the process of collecting the ransom at Urosembe, being the outskirts of Jalingo, they were tracked and promptly arrested.
I kidnapped my junior sister and demanded ransom of 10 million from my father.
Have you been doing this or?
No, this is my first time.
Why did you decide to do it? What happened?
My aim is to, if I get the money, I will just study abroad. That's my aim. If I get the money.
Okay. What's your level of education?
100 levels at Adamasid University.
Okay, 100 level. What course?
Computer science.
Meanwhile, the abductors of 6 female students of a secondary school in Kaduna State and their teachers. The governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, has said the abductors of those girls have finally made contact with the parents of the students and relatives of the teachers, while efforts are already ongoing to secure the release. He also explains that the intelligence report from security agencies have revealed that the kidnappers are working with Boko Haram terrorists.
We have been receiving intelligence from 3 months ago that the bandits have connected with some elements of Boko Haram and they will be targeting schools to kidnap children because they know that that's what makes the news. And we have reinforced security around our schools. But this school called Engravers Academy is in the middle of nowhere. Until yesterday or 2 days ago when the kidnap happened, I did not even know this school existed. As at this morning, the kidnappers have made contact with the parents, and we have got the parents of the kidnapped children and the relations of the teachers to be in one place so that there is one line of communication with the kidnappers to facilitate their release. And I am confident that not only are we going to secure the release of the students and their teachers, but we are going to get the kidnappers by the grace of God. It is always a moment of sadness when young people that are trying to get an education become victims of these criminals. But kidnapping has become so widespread now that for many people it is not news. But for us in Kaduna, this is one of the biggest tragedies.
Staying with the rising cases of kidnappings across the country, the police and other security agencies insist they're doing everything possible to put the trend under check, but it appears some of these bandits are still on the prowl, hunting for vulnerable victims. Our next report chronicles some recent cases of kidnappings in the country and what authorities say they're doing to address it.
Kidnapping for ransom, an act that became pronounced in Nigeria 6 years after the advent of democratic governance. It was first rampant in the Niger Delta, where militants kidnapped prominent persons to protest the inequality in the region. Before long, it had spread to other parts of the country, spreading from the creeks to other communities, educational institutions, and even the highway. Almost on a daily basis, victims suffer in the hands of these armed men, while families dole out millions before they regain their freedom. Suspected kidnap kingpin Hamisu Wadume made headlines in August after he was rearrested by operatives of the IG's intelligence response team over allegations of being behind abductions in Taraba State and its environs.
We must, as a strategy, strengthen partnership among ourselves as a community on the one hand and between the communities and the police on the other hand. The strength of this partnership and the commitment of all actors within the process will undoubtedly influence the extent of success we can record against the criminals.
In the same month, 5 passengers were abducted along the Shagamu-Benin Expressway in Ogun State while on transit to Lagos. They were eventually rescued by the police.
I was manhandled, I was ruffled, I was tortured, name it. It's horrible where this country is driving at. It's horrible.
A case in point is that of the mother of former Super Eagles coach Samson Siasia, who was kidnapped twice within a space of 4 years.
Say, wake up now, say, come outside. Come outside another year, they shout, they tell say, oh, now don't come again. What don't do now? Wait till only me day for this old day. I'm on down and they can't carry me. Say, shut up your mouth to say, come outside.
The latest kidnap case of students and teachers in a Kaduna private school is another reminder of the challenge this menace poses to citizens and for government to match words with action and ensure the safety of citizens.
We'll have more on the state of kidnappings in the country a bit later in the bulletin. In the meantime, President Muhammadu Buhari is back in the nation's capital, Abuja, after a 3-day visit to South Africa, where he met with President Cyril Ramaphosa over the recent attack on Nigerians and Nigerian businesses in the country. One of the takeaways from the visit is the joint agreement signed by both leaders to grant 10-year visas to businessmen, academics, and frequent travelers to both countries. The president also had a town hall meeting with Nigerians living in South Africa, where he told them to be good ambassadors, excel, and always remember home. Our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, reports.
The town hall meeting began with a moment of silence for Nigerians who have died in South Africa. Nigeria's High Commissioner to South Africa, Ambassador Kabiru Bala, was indeed pleased that the president finally came.
And I'm most grateful for your coming, Mr. President.
Various members of the audience had a thing or two to say, from deliberately branding Nigeria to technology transfer and even reserving positions in various fields for Nigerians in the diaspora.
So, Your Excellency, I want to ask, will your government, in all kindness, consider a bill that will perhaps reserve some percentage of certain positions in various sectors in Nigeria for Nigerians in diaspora? Thank you.
Some positions in government for Nigerians in diaspora. Thank you very much for your answer. Yes.
The president also reminded Nigerians to remember that the nation is judged by their conduct at all times.
Second, in whatever legitimate engagement you find yourself, You must strive to excel and be the best. Third, while you are out in diaspora, do not forget home. You represent some of the best human assets that Nigeria has.
The chairperson and chief executive of the Nigerian Diaspora Commission, Mrs. Abike Dabiri Erewa, says the president's handling of the recent violent attacks on foreign nationals and subsequent visit goes a very long way, especially for Nigerians.
We hope for results. We hope that we won't stories of, oh, these attacks will be a thing of the past. And what matters is follow-up on the part of both countries, because they have senior government officials at both levels to follow up, and the meetings will be more regular. And also, very importantly, is to take the education to the people, to the grassroots.
I'm so happy about the visit because all this, throughout this crisis, we are living in fears. But the way our government reacted made us to feel relaxed.
The president has since left South Africa to return to Nigeria. From Pretoria, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
In part two, after the break, we'll open discussions on the spate of kidnapping and demand for ransom by kidnappers in many states across the country. We'll be joined by security consultant Colonel Yomi Dari. Stay with us.